People aren't that keen on voting anymore. If we have a quick look at global voter turnout levels, being the number of eligible voters who actually cast a ballot, we can see that they have been steadily declining for a while. This trend is mostly thanks to Europe, which consistently held a turnout rate of over 80% in the decades after World War II, only to see it plunge beneath the global average to less than 65% around 2010. This may sound just like a lot of crunching numbers for nothing, but the implications of these developments are actually pretty serious. Of course, you could just shrug it off and say people are free to choose whether they want to vote or not. But if this trend continues, we might soon have a full-grown crisis of democracy on our hands. See, a democracy only works when the public believes in the legitimacy of its elections. However, the less citizens vote, the less representative of the will of the people elections become. And if elections don't really represent the inhabitants of a place, why should anybody care about them? There comes a point at which it makes just as much sense to just cast dice. So what can be done to jack those turnout rates up again? Either we motivate people to vote, or make voting itself less cumbersome. Since voting just isn't super much fun, the only way to motivate people to do it is to make it mandatory. This is called compulsory voting, and it generally means you have to show up at a polling station. Otherwise you face more or less mild punishments, like a fine or something a little more severe, like losing your right to vote or to work in the public sector. But in many countries, compulsory voting is toothless, since it is in theory the law, but there are no consequences if you do not abide by it. However, in countries that do enforce it, it certainly delivers appealing results. Countries like Australia, Belgium or Brazil, which all have compulsory voting, are among the ones with the highest voter turnouts. Still, compulsory voting isn't super popular. Being forced by law to vote or otherwise get punished even slightly probably doesn't make you feel like a valued citizen. If compulsory voting isn't your cup of tea, your best bet to get more people to vote is to just make voting easier. Rather than trying to force people to do something that they don't want to do, you could just make the thing itself a little less of a pain in the ass. Because let's be honest, voting is often tedious and in the grand scheme of things a huge sink of time and money. Just think of all the stuff you have to get done in order to vote. And that's not only you, that's millions and millions of people every year. In many places, elections feel like an obstacle course full of paperwork and pointless waiting. But it doesn't have to be that way. With a few fixes, voting can go from nerve-wracking to actually quite enjoyable. Obviously, there's no way around gathering information for an election, but providing better access to it might go a long way. A while ago, Google implemented a new feature in its search engine that helps US voters with details on how to register, deadlines, and important information on the whole voting process. Not long after that, Hank Green and accomplices launched a YouTube channel with the same goal, fittingly named How to Vote in Every State. Stuff like that makes gathering information about elections so much easier. A huge thing that keeps a lot of people from voting is voter registration. Many don't know how to register, some miss the registration deadline, and some just don't bother to do it because of the extra effort it takes. But you cannot only make registration easier with things like online registration or longer registration periods. As a matter of fact, you can get rid of it altogether. Many countries don't require citizens to do anything in order to register for an election. They simply use a central register of residents that is permanently updated and is, among other things, used as a voter register. Additionally, with the help of such a register, citizens can also be notified by mail so they are informed about coming elections and the steps necessary to vote. Next up, a really obvious one. Schedule elections on holidays or weekends. It's bothersome enough to get to the polls without also needing to take time off from the job. And while that still won't be any help to a lot of waitresses and taxi drivers, it's still an improvement for a huge majority of people. And while we're at it, it's also really useful to organize an election properly. This means providing enough polling stations so everyone can vote without going on an hour-long trip. It also means providing enough staff for these stations so voters don't have to wait for half an eternity to get their ballot and do the deed. If it's really hard to have polling stations near every single citizen, let's say because half of the country consists of extremely sparsely populated jungle or desert, just implement postal voting, so you can easily vote in every place that has a mailbox. And yes, all of this stuff costs money, but you can't run elections on a shoestring budget anyway. And this way you might even end up saving money. But most importantly, you'll get more people to vote, which means better political representation, and in the end, a better democracy for us all. Alright, we're all done here. If you liked this video, feel free to like and share it. If you want to tell me just about anything, please do so in the comments. Thanks for checking in. That's all, peeps.